I was serving coffee when my daughter-in-law, Paula, dropped the bomb. With that smile that had always seemed too sweet, too perfect, she raised her glass and announced it to everyone at the table. "I have a wonderful surprise for my mother-in-law. Armando and I sold our apartment. We're moving into Mom's house tomorrow." My son, my Armando, was smiling by her side, like a proud little boy. The other guests clapped. Someone said what a lovely family we were. I calmly took my napkin, dabbed the corners of my mouth, and replied with a voice that came out steadier than I expected. "That's perfect, Paula. But you'll be sleeping on the street, because tomorrow at 8 in the morning, I'm handing the keys to this house to the new owners." The silence that followed was so thick, you could have cut it with a dessert fork. Paula dropped her glass. Armando turned pale. The guests stared at their plates as if the napkins had suddenly become the most interesting things in the world. No one dared to breathe, and I simply took another sip of my coffee and watched them fall apart. Because after 65 years in this world, after raising that son alone, after building this house with my own hands and the sweat of years of work, I had finally learned something. Silence can be the most powerful weapon when used at the exact right moment. But to understand how we got to that instant, to that scene that split my life in two, I have to go back. I have to tell you who I was before I became the woman who left her own family speechless. My name is Amelia Gonzalez. I am 65 years old, and for most of my life, I was invisible. I don't mean literally invisible. Of course, people saw me. They said hello on the street. Armando called me Mom. But no one really looked at me. No one asked what I felt, what I needed, what I dreamed of. I was simply Mom, the one who was there, the one who would always be there, like an old but reliable piece of furniture, like a shadow that moves when you move but never has its own light. I was widowed 12 years ago. My husband, Roberto, died of a massive heart attack on a random Tuesday while watering the plants in the yard. He fell among the hydrangeas he loved so much. By the time I found him, there was nothing to be done. I remember the first thing I thought, after the shock, was, now I am completely alone. Armando had already been married for 3 years. He was living his life. He had his job, his new wife, his plans, and I was left in this big house, with silence as my only companion and memories hanging on every wall like photographs no one looks at. The first few months were the hardest. I'd wake up expecting to hear Roberto's voice calling me from the kitchen. I'd set out 2 coffee cups and then remember. Just one. Always just one. Armando would come visit me on Sundays. Sometimes, when he didn't have other plans, he'd bring donuts from the bakery and stay for an hour. 2, if I was lucky, we talked about unimportant things. The weather, his job, the news. Never about what really mattered. Never about what hurt. It was in that emptiness that Paula appeared. Or rather, where I truly saw her for the first time. Because Paula had been there from the beginning, ever since she married my son. But I had only seen her as Armando's wife, the daughter-in-law, another person at family dinners, someone who smiled a lot and said little, polite, proper, perfect on the surface. But after Roberto's death, Paula started visiting more often. At first, I thought it was genuine kindness. She would come on Wednesday afternoons with Armando. They brought flowers. They asked how I was, if I needed anything. Paula offered to help me with the groceries, with the cleaning, with those things that suddenly seemed heavier now that I was alone. I was grateful. Of course, I was grateful. What mother doesn't feel blessed when her son and daughter-in-law show concern? When they seem to care? When the phone rings and it's their voice on the other end? When someone asks, "How are you, Mom? Really? How are you?" It took me months to realize that Paula's questions always led somewhere. They weren't open-ended questions, the kind that come from the heart. They were questions with a destination, with intent, like fishhooks covered in velvet. It started with small things, subtle, so subtle you almost don't notice until it's too late. A comment here, an observation there. Paula would look around the house with those big eyes and say, "Such a big house for just you, Suegra. Aren't you scared here at night? This neighborhood is changing so much." I read in the news the other day that 2 houses on this street were broken into, and I would nod. Yes, It's big. Yes, sometimes it's scary. But it's my house. The house Roberto and I bought 40 years ago. The house where we raised Armando. Where we celebrated Christmases and birthdays. Where I buried my dog. Where I painted the walls yellow when I turned 50 because I'd always wanted yellow walls and Roberto said it was too loud. This house has my footsteps etched into every floorboard, my dried tears on every pillow, my laughter still bouncing in the corners. It's not just a house. It's my life built of brick and mortar. But Paula didn't see it that way. To her, it was just property. An asset. Something with market value. And little by little, visit by visit, she began to plant that seed. The seed of doubt. The seed of fear. The seed of dependence. Armando started to change his tune, too. He no longer said, "How are you, Mom?" He said, "Are you okay here alone, Mom? Wouldn't it be better to find something smaller, easier to maintain, safer?" Paula and I were thinking you could sell this house and buy a nice condo downtown, close to us, so you're not so isolated. And every time he said it, Paula would nod with that smile. That damn smile that now, looking back, I recognize for what it always was. The smile of someone playing chess while you think you're playing cards. 6 months passed since Paula began her regular visits. 6 months in which my house stopped being my refuge and became the set of a play I didn't know I was starring in. The Wednesday visits became sacred. Paula would arrive on time, always with something in her hands. Sometimes flowers, sometimes bread, sometimes just that smile that was already starting to wear on me, though I wouldn't dare admit it. She would sit in the living room, in the same armchair that had been Roberto's, and begin her routine. First, she'd ask about my health, then about the house. Then she'd start with the stories, always stories about other people, neighbors, acquaintances, people I didn't know, but who apparently had lives full of tragedies that could serve as warnings for me. Mrs. Ramirez from the block behind us, she'd say, had to sell her house for almost nothing because she couldn't maintain it. Imagine. Suegra. A whole life there, and she ended up in a nursing home because she had no other choice. If she had sold when she could still get a good price, she'd be comfortable now in a place more appropriate for her age. I listened. I nodded. I served more coffee. And inside, something told me these stories weren't accidental, that every word was measured, calculated. But I was good at ignoring my intuition. I had spent my whole life being good at ignoring the things I didn't want to see. Armando had changed, too. Or maybe he had always been this way, and I just hadn't wanted to see it. My son, my only son, the boy I nursed and raised and taught to walk, holding his hands in this very yard, now looked at me differently. He no longer looked at me like his mother. He looked at me like a problem that needed solving, like a responsibility that weighed him down. When he came alone, which was less and less frequent, he talked about money. "Mom," he'd say, "I've been thinking about your finances. This house must cost a fortune in maintenance. The yard, the heating bill in the winter, the roof that needs repairs. You could be using that money for yourself, to enjoy, to travel, to live better. Travel. That word was repeated a lot lately. Paula used it as bait. Imagine, suegra. If you sell this house, you could see Europe, or visit your sister in California. How long has it been since you saw her? 10 years, right? With the money from the sale, you could go whenever you wanted. And it sounded good. Of course it sounded good. Who wouldn't want to travel? Who wouldn't want to see their sister after 10 years? Who wouldn't want to be free from the weight of a big old house that sometimes, in the quiet nights, felt more like a prison than a home? But there was something they didn't understand. Or maybe they did understand, and simply didn't care. This house wasn't just walls and a roof. It was the only thing I had left of Roberto. It was the physical proof that my life had meant something, that I had built something solid, something real, something that couldn't just be erased because it was now inconvenient. The first time they mentioned concrete numbers was on a Sunday. Paula had prepared a special lunch. She invited her parents, too. Don Cesar and Doña Sonia Palacios. Nice people, always proper, always smiling. That day, Paula served lamb, my favorite dish. I should have known then. When someone makes you your favorite dish for no apparent reason, they want something from you. After dessert, when we were all relaxed and satisfied, Paula brought up the subject almost as if commenting on the weather. Suegra, Armando and I have been looking at condos. There's a beautiful one in the new building downtown, 2 bedrooms. Terrace with a view. 24-hour security. A gym. Event room. All-inclusive. And it costs only $250,000. I sipped my coffee. I smiled politely. "How nice," I said. "You'll love it. Save up, and you'll have it soon." Paula laughed. That laugh that sounded like bells but left a bitter echo. "Oh, suegra, we can't save $250,000. With Armando's salary and my income, we barely cover our current rent. But we were thinking, your house is worth at least $400,000. You could sell it, buy yourself something comfortable for $150,000, and use the rest to help Armando buy us that apartment. We'd all win. You'd have something more manageable, and we'd finally have an asset." The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Don Cesar cleared his throat. Doña Sonia focused on her cup. Armando stared at his plate as if it were the most fascinating thing in the universe. And Paula watched me with those expectant eyes. Waiting for me to say yes. Of course. That's what mothers are for. To sacrifice themselves one more time. But I said nothing. I just smiled and said I would think about it. That it was a big decision. That I needed time. Paula pursed her lips. Armando nodded quickly, too quickly, and changed the subject. But the poison was already injected. The idea was already planted. And they knew it. The following weeks were a systematic campaign. Paula came by more often. Now she brought brochures for condos, printouts from websites, photos of small, bright places overlooking parks. Look at this one, Sugra. It has a gorgeous open-plan kitchen. And this one has central heating. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing. Maintenance service included. It's like living in a hotel. Armando called every other day. "Mom, we saw another condo today. Perfect for you. On the first floor. No stairs. With a ramp for when you're older. Close to the grocery store. Close to the clinic. Close to us. You could walk to our house in 10 minutes. And I listened. I nodded. I said it sounded nice, that I'd consider it. But inside, something was changing. Something was waking up. A small voice that had been asleep for decades was beginning to whisper. A voice that said, "This isn't right. This isn't love. This is something else." But I wasn't ready to listen to it yet. I still wanted to believe my son loved me, that my daughter-in-law cared about me, that all of this was genuine, that I was the ungrateful one for doubting, the selfish one for clinging to a big house when they needed help, when they, young and with their whole lives ahead of them, deserved to have their own place. That's how manipulation works. It doesn't arrive shouting. It arrives whispering. It makes you doubt yourself. It makes you feel guilty for wanting to keep what's yours. It makes you believe that being generous means giving everything away, that being a good mother means disappearing so your children can shine. And I was about to fall into that trap. I was about to sign my own sentence. Because one Thursday afternoon, after another visit from Paula filled with brochures and dreams that weren't mine, I picked up the phone and called a real estate agent. I made an appointment for him to come appraise the house. I hung up the phone and sat in the empty living room. I looked at the yellow walls, the photos of Armando as a child, the vase Roberto gave me for our 20th anniversary, and for the first time in months, I cried. I cried because I knew I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life, but I still didn't know how to stop myself. The realtor arrived on a Tuesday morning. His name was Daniel Ruiz, and he carried a black leather briefcase that smelled new. He walked through my house with a notepad in his hand, writing things down, measuring spaces, taking pictures with his phone. I followed him in silence, feeling like a stranger in my own home, as if it no longer belonged to me. As if just by making that call, I had started an irreversible process. "The house is in excellent condition, Mrs. Gonzalez," he told me as he checked the living room windows. "Prime location, large yard, 3 bedrooms, 2 full baths. I estimate we can put it on the market for $420,000, maybe $450 if we do some cosmetic upgrades." Fresh paint, change the door handles, modernize the kitchen a bit, $420,000. It was more than Paula had mentioned, more than I had imagined. For a second, I let the number float in my mind. I could buy something small for $150,000 as Paula had suggested. I'd be left with almost $300,000. I could help Armando with his apartment. I'd still have money left for me. To travel, to live without worries for the years I had left. It sounded reasonable. It sounded logical. It sounded like the right decision. So why did I feel like I was betraying myself? Why was every cell in my body screaming no, that this was wrong? That once I signed those papers, there would be no going back. I told Daniel Ruiz I would think about it, that I would call him in a few days. He left me his card and departed with a professional smile. When I closed the door behind him, I leaned against the wood, my heart beating too fast. I had crossed a line. I had taken the first real step toward surrender. That night, Armando called, as if he had known, as if Paula had some special radar that detected my moments of weakness. "Mom, how are you? You've seemed off lately. Are you eating well? Are you sleeping okay? Paula is worried about you. She says you look tired." "I'm fine, Armando. Just thinking about things." "What things, Mom?" "About the house. About what you said. About the condos." There was a pause. I could hear his breathing on the other end of the line. Then his voice changed. It became more animated, more hopeful. "Really, Mom? You're considering it? That's wonderful. Paula is going to be so happy. We saw another incredible place. It has 3 bedrooms. One could be for when you visit. You could stay with us on weekends. It would be like having a close family again." A close family. Those words lodged somewhere deep. What was a close family? Was it me selling my house to finance my son's dreams? Was it me making myself smaller so they could have more space? Was it me disappearing little by little until I became the grandmother who visits on weekends if there's room and if she's not too much trouble? The following days were a blur of conversations and subtle pressure. Paula came by every day now. She no longer waited for Wednesdays. She'd show up in the morning with fresh bread. In the afternoon with excuses just to say hello. Always with something new to show me. Always with another reason why selling was the best option. "Look, suegra." She brought photos of a condo that she said was perfect, on the 5th floor. Small but cozy balcony, gym in the building, and the best part, it's on sale. $135,000. You'd save $15,000 from what we thought. You could keep that extra money for emergencies. And there was more. There was always more. Paula had calculated everything. The maintenance costs I would save. The lower property taxes of a condo versus a house. The security of living in a building with a doorman. The convenience of not having to worry about the yard, the roof, the old pipes. She had an answer for every one of my doubts. She had thought of every detail. It was as if she had been planning this for months, and she probably had. Probably from the moment Roberto died and I was left alone in this big house, Paula had seen an opportunity, an untapped asset, a widowed, vulnerable mother-in-law who could be convinced, molded, directed where she needed. Armando also ramped up his calls. They weren't every other day anymore. They were daily. Sometimes twice a day. "Mom, we found the perfect apartment for us. It has a study. Paula could work from home. I could have an office for my things. But we need to decide quickly. The owner has other offers. If we want to secure it, we need to make a down payment of $50,000 in 2 weeks. $50,000. In 2 weeks. The urgency had suddenly appeared, like a summer storm. It was no longer whenever you want, Mom. It was no longer think about it calmly. Now it was now. Now it was immediately. Now it was, if you don't do this, you're going to ruin this unique opportunity for your son. And I felt the weight of that responsibility crushing me. Because if I said no, if I refused, if I clung to my house and my life, then I would be the selfish one. I would be the bad mother. I would be the one who put her whims before the needs of her only son. Paula started bringing her mother, Doña Sonia. The two of them would sit in my living room and talk about how hard it is for young people today. The expensive rents. The impossibility of saving. How lucky children were who had parents that could help them. Doña Sonia would talk about how she had helped Paula and her siblings, how she had sold some land she owned to give them the down payment for their houses, and how happy it made her to see them established. It was a mirror in which I was supposed to see myself reflected. A good, sacrificed, happy mother. A mother who finds joy in renunciation, in erasing herself, in becoming a ladder for others to climb. But something in me resisted. Something stubborn and old and tired that said enough. That said, not again. That said, I've already given enough. I've already been enough. I've already sacrificed enough. My whole life being a wife, being a mother, being the one who holds things together, the one who gives in, the one who makes herself small. And now that I finally had something of my own, now that I finally had my space and my time and my house, now I had to give that up, too. One afternoon, Paula arrived with papers. She had researched the whole process. She had spoken to a lawyer friend. She had prepared a draft of an agreement. Look, suegra, it's very simple. You sell the house, we help you find your condo. And you lend us $250,000 for our apartment. We'll call it a loan, so everything is legal. We'll pay you back in 10 years. $25,000 a year. It's totally fair. We all win. Loan. That word sounded official. It sounded safe. But I wasn't stupid. I knew what lending money to family meant. It meant never seeing it again. It meant that every time I mentioned it, I'd be the stingy one. The one who collects. The one who doesn't understand that family is family, and money shouldn't matter between family. I looked at the papers Paula had spread across my table. I looked at her expectant face. I looked out the window at the yard, where Roberto had fallen among the hydrangeas. And for the first time in weeks, I felt clarity. I felt anger. I felt something inside me say no more. But I still didn't say anything. I still smiled and said I would review it calmly, that I needed time. Paula frowned. Time is running out, suegra. That apartment isn't going to wait for us forever. Then you'll have to find another one, I said, with more firmness than I intended. Paula looked at me as if I had slapped her. She left without saying goodbye, and I was left alone with the papers on the table and a new feeling growing in my chest, a feeling that felt dangerously like freedom. The days after my refusal were strange. Paula didn't come for almost a week. Armando didn't call either. It was as if they had decided to give me the silent treatment, as if my lack of immediate cooperation deserved to be punished with absence. And the funny thing is, instead of feeling guilty or worried, I felt relieved. The house was mine again. The silence was peaceful again, not lonely. I could drink my coffee in the morning without waiting for the doorbell to ring with another idea, another plan, another reason why I should change my life. But the relief was short-lived, because Paula hadn't given up. She had only changed her strategy. When she returned, she no longer came alone. She brought Armando, and they both had long, worried faces, as if they were carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. "Mom, we need to talk," Armando said, sitting on the sofa with that defeated posture that made him look like a child again. Paula sat next to him, taking his hand, looking at me with glassy eyes as if she were about to cry. "What's wrong?" I asked, though something in me already knew this was theater, that this was the next act in their carefully planned play. Paula took a breath. She let a single tear roll down her cheek before speaking. "Suegra, we didn't want to tell you this. We didn't want to worry you. But we're in a very difficult situation. The owner of the apartment where we live is selling. He gave us 3 months to vacate. 3 months, Amelia. And we can't find anything we can afford in our current budget. Everything is outrageously expensive. The rents have gone up 40% in the last year." Armando nodded, his head bowed. "It's true, Mom. We've been looking desperately. But everything in our price range is horrible. Dangerous neighborhoods, old buildings, apartments so small a bed barely fits. Paula cries every night, thinking we might have to go live with her parents. And you know how Don Cesar is. He's a good person, but very strict. Paula would be miserable living under his rules again." I looked at my son, my 38-year-old son who had gone to a good university, who had a stable job as an engineer, who earned a decent salary. and who was now sitting in my living room saying he couldn't find a place to live without my help. Something didn't add up, but they continued before I could process my thoughts. That's why we need that apartment we showed you so badly, Paula continued, wiping her tears. It's our only chance to have something of our own, to not be at the mercy of landlords who can kick us out whenever they want, to build equity. Armando is almost 40 years old. I'm 35. If we don't do it now, when? We're going to spend our whole lives renting. Our whole lives with nothing of our own. Our whole lives insecure. And the loan we asked you for, Armando added, we would pay it back religiously. $25,000 a year. I have a raise promised at work. Paula is going to start tutoring English. We'll tighten our belts, but we will pay you. You're my mother. I would never fail you. It was convincing. It was emotional. It was the kind of speech that would make any mother feel she had to do something. But I had had a week of silence, a week to think, a week to listen to that little voice that had been trying to get my attention for months. And what about your current expenses? I asked calmly. If you can barely afford rent, how are you going to pay the mortgage on a new apartment, plus the HOA fees, plus the utilities? A $250,000 apartment with a normal mortgage requires payments of at least $3,000 a month. Can you afford that? Paula and Armando looked at each other. There was an awkward silence. That's why we need the loan to be interest-free, Paula finally said. And if you could give us the first 2 years as a grace period to get settled, that would be perfect. That way we could get organized financially. Ah, there it was, the interest-free loan, with a 2-year grace period, which meant that for 2 years they wouldn't pay me anything. And afterward, if afterward ever came, they would pay me $25,000 a year for 10 years. But the math didn't add up. $250,000 divided by 10 years was $25,000 annually. But with a 2-year grace period, that would be 8 years of payments, which meant over $30,000 a year. But they had said 25. The numbers danced and changed to suit their needs. And if I can't? I asked. If I don't sell the house, what will you do? The temperature in the room changed. Paula's jaw tightened. Armando looked at me with a mixture of pain and reproach. Mom, this isn't just about money. It's about family. It's about supporting each other. Dad always said family comes first, that you sacrifice for your own. Using Roberto's words was a low blow. Armando knew it. Paula knew it. And I knew it. But Roberto had also told me other things. He had told me to take care of myself, to not let anyone make me feel small, that my happiness mattered too. But Armando didn't mention those words, only the ones that suited him. I'll think about it, I said finally. Give me time. We don't have much time, Paula replied, her tone no longer soft. The apartment is going to sell, and our lease ends in 3 months. We need an answer in 2 weeks, max. 2 weeks. The rush again. The pressure again. The fabricated urgency, so I would make an emotional decision instead of a rational one. They left soon after. Paula didn't even pretend to be nice anymore. Armando kissed my forehead, but it was a cold kiss. Mechanical, like someone fulfilling an obligation. I watched them leave from the window, and something inside me broke. Or maybe it pieced itself back together. It's hard to tell the difference sometimes. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, thinking about everything. About the years I had worked to buy this house. Roberto and I working double shifts. Me cleaning other people's houses so we could make the down payment. Living on the bare minimum to pay the mortgage. 25 years of payments until it was finally ours. Completely ours. No one could take it from us. It was our reward for so much effort. Our legacy, my security. And now I was supposed to just hand it over. Turn it into cash to fund the dreams of my son and his wife. Shrink my life into a $130,000 condo so they could have their $250,000 apartment. The math was clear. I lost space, security, and equity. They gained everything. But there was something else bothering me. During their visits over the last few months, I had noticed things. Little details that didn't fit with their story of financial hardship. Paula always had new clothes. Armando had traded in his car last year for a newer model. They went out to dinner frequently, according to their social media posts, which I checked sometimes, though I was embarrassed to admit it. They had gone on vacation to the beach 3 months ago. Pictures from expensive restaurants, nice hotels, drinks with little umbrellas, and yet they couldn't save for an apartment. They couldn't afford a decent rent. They desperately needed my help, or they'd end up on the street. Something didn't add up. Something smelled wrong. And I was finally allowing myself to smell that rot instead of ignoring it. The next morning, I did something I had never done. I called my sister, Lorena, in California. We hadn't really talked in 2 years. Short calls at Christmas, birthday texts, but nothing substantial. I told her everything. Every detail, every bit of pressure, every manipulation disguised as family love. Lorena listened in silence. When I finished, she let out a long, deep sigh. "Amelia," she told me with that firmness she always had, "they are using you. What you're describing isn't love. It's exploitation. And if you sell that house, you will regret it for the rest of your life. That house is your security. It's your independence. Once you hand it over to them, you'll be at their mercy. And believe me, the mercy of people like that is not a good place to be." My sister Lorena's words echoed in my head for days. They are using you. Exploitation. At their mercy. They were harsh words. Words that hurt because they carried truth. But there was still a part of me that wanted to believe she was exaggerating, that I was being paranoid, that my son couldn't be that calculating, that this was just a misunderstanding, a difficult situation where we were all trying to do our best. That illusion shattered 2 days later when Paula showed up unannounced. It was 8 in the morning. I was still in my robe, drinking my first cup of coffee. She rang the doorbell insistently until I opened it. She walked in without waiting for an invitation, a folder under her arm and a determination in her eyes that made me instinctively step back. "Suegra, we need to talk." "Seriously," she said, dropping the folder on the kitchen table. "A week has passed. I need an answer. The owner of the apartment is pushing. There are 2 other couples interested. If we don't make the down payment this week, we lose it. Paula, it's 8 in the morning. You haven't even said good morning." She looked at me as if I had said something absurd. "I don't have time for formalities, Amelia. This is important. This is your son's future. Either you care or you don't. It's that simple." The use of my name instead of Sugra hit me. The pretense of affection was gone. The mask of the sweet, respectful daughter-in-law was gone. This was the real Paula. The Paula who had been hiding under the smiles and the pastries and the kind visits. She opened the folder. There were more papers. Forms. Contracts. All of it already filled out with my information. My name, my address, the details of my house. Only my signature was missing. She had prepared everything. She had assumed I would say yes, that I would eventually give in, that a good mother always gives in. "I already spoke to Daniel Ruiz," she continued, pointing to the documents. "He's ready to put the house on the market today if we sign these papers. I also found the perfect condo for you, $120,000. It's cheaper than we thought. You save another $15,000. That extra money you could give to us for furniture for the new apartment. We need to furnish 3 bedrooms from scratch. $120,000. They had lowered the price again. And now they wanted money for furniture too. The demand was growing. The piece of my life they wanted was getting bigger with every conversation. "Paula," I said, trying to stay calm, "I am not signing anything today. I need time. I need to think. I need to consult with my own lawyer." "Why do you need a lawyer?" "I already consulted with one. Everything is in order. Everything is legal. Just sign, and we can move forward. It's my house. It's my decision, and I will not be pressured." Paula slammed the folder shut. The sound echoed in the kitchen like a gunshot. She looked at me with a coldness that chilled my blood. "You know what your problem is, Amelia? You're selfish. You always have been. Armando tells me things. He tells me how, when he was a kid, you worked all the time, how you left him alone, how you never had time for him. And now that he can finally have something good in his life, something he really wants, you're putting him second again. You're choosing your things over him again." Every word was venom injected directly into my deepest guilts. The years I had worked double shifts to feed him. The afternoons I couldn't be at his soccer games because I was cleaning other people's houses. The times I came home so tired I could barely read him a story before bed. Everything I had done out of necessity, out of love, to give him a better future, was now being used as a weapon against me. "Get out of my house," I said, in a voice I didn't recognize as my own. "What did you say?" I said. "Get out of my house. Now." Paula looked at me with contempt. She picked up her folder. She walked to the door. But before leaving, she turned. "You're going to regret this," she said. "When you're old and sick and alone and you need help, you're going to remember this day. You're going to remember you had the chance to be part of the family, and you rejected it. Don't expect Armando to be there for you when you turn your back on us now." The door slammed shut with a bang that made the pictures on the wall tremble. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, shaking, the cold coffee in my hand. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt rage. Pure, clean, justified rage. That afternoon, Armando called. His voice was different, hard, controlled. "Mom, Paula told me what happened. How you treated her. How you threw her out of the house. I can't believe you were so cruel to her. She was just trying to help, to organize things to make it easier for you. Armando, your wife came into my house without permission at 8 in the morning. She pressured me to sign papers I hadn't even read. She insulted me when I refused. And you're calling to tell me I was cruel?" "She's stressed, Mom. We're stressed. Our situation is difficult. And you're not helping. You have this huge house you don't need. You have money you don't use. And you refuse to help your own son. Your only family. Your wife told me that when I'm old and sick, I shouldn't expect you to be there for me. Is that stress too, Armando? Or is it something else?" There was silence. A long silence that hurt more than any words. Because in that silence, I understood that my son was not going to defend me. He wasn't going to tell me Paula had crossed a line. He wasn't going to apologize. He had chosen a side. And it wasn't mine. "Mom, I have to go. I need to think. We both need to think about what we really want. If we want to be a family or if we want to be strangers." He hung up. My son hung up on me. I stood with the phone in my hand, listening to the dial tone until it turned into that high-pitched squeal that means the line is dead. A deadline. How appropriate. The following days, there were no calls, no visits. It was as if I had died to them. As if by refusing to hand over my life, I had lost the right to be a mother. The silence was deafening, and painful, and liberating, all at the same time. But I didn't stay still. I called a lawyer, a real one, not Paula's friend, Alberto Lopez, a man in his 60s with an office downtown and an impeccable reputation. I told him everything, every detail, every bit of pressure. I showed him the papers Paula had left. Mr. Lopez reviewed them with a serious expression. "Mrs. Gonzalez," he said finally, "these documents are extremely favorable to your son and daughter-in-law. The loan they're proposing has no real collateral for you. There are no protection clauses if they default. There is no interest to compensate for inflation. And the way it's written, if something were to happen to you, the debt would simply disappear. They would not inherit the obligation to pay, so if I die, they get to keep everything and owe nothing." Exactly. Furthermore, I've seen cases like this. Family loans that are never repaid. Children who promise and then find excuses. One year, it's the bad economy. The next, it's a health problem. The next, they've had a baby and need the money for the child. And the mother never sees her money again. But she also can't pressure them because it's family. Because what will people say? Because a mother doesn't charge her children. I leaned back in the chair, feeling the weight of the truth. Everything I had sensed, everything Lorena had told me, was being confirmed by a professional. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being selfish. I was being prudent. I was protecting the little I had left. "What do you recommend?" I asked. "That you don't sell?" he said without hesitation. "That you don't sign anything? That you keep your house? It is your security, your asset, your home. Once you lose it, It will be very difficult to regain that level of stability. And if you truly want to help your son, there are other ways that don't leave you vulnerable. I left that office with a clarity I hadn't had in months. I knew what I had to do, but I still lacked the courage to do it. I still had hope that Armando would call, that he would apologize, that he would say, "Mom, I understand. I'm sorry. We went too far." But that call never came. 3 weeks passed without hearing anything from Armando or Paula. 3 weeks of silence that hurt like an open wound that wouldn't heal. I checked my phone constantly, hoping to see his name on the screen. Every time the doorbell rang, my heart leaped, thinking maybe they had come to apologize. But no, nothing. The punishment continued. And I was beginning to understand that this was the pattern. Pressure, rejection, silence, until he gave in. Until the pain of their absence was greater than my need to protect myself. But something had changed in me during those weeks. The conversation with Mr. Lopez had planted a seed, and that seed was growing. I had started to review my finances carefully, my savings, my expenses, the pension I received from Roberto, the income from the small retail space we rented out on the first floor of the house, something Roberto had built years ago, and that gave us a monthly income of $1,200. I ran the numbers, lots of numbers, and I discovered something interesting. If I sold the house for $420,000, as Daniel Ruiz had said, and bought a condo for $120,000, as Paula wanted, I'd be left with $300,000. Minus the $250,000 they wanted as a loan, I'd be left with $50,000, and a small condo. I would lose the retail space. I would lose that $1,200 a month of passive income. I would lose my yard, my space, my history. And what would I gain? The supposed peace of mind from knowing I had helped my son. The illusion that they would visit me more often. The fantasy that we would be a close family. But I had already seen how they treated me when I didn't do what they wanted. The silence, the emotional abandonment, the veiled threats. And that was now, when I still had something they wanted. What would it be like afterward, when I had nothing left to offer? It was then that I made a decision that terrified me and liberated me at the same time. If they were going to treat me like I didn't exist anyway, at least they would do it while I still had my house, my security, my dignity. I was not going to sell. I was not going to lend them money. I was not going to be part of this plan that only benefited me on paper but in reality left me vulnerable and impoverished. But I didn't tell them anything yet, because something else was growing in my mind. A plan of my own. An idea that had started as a small thought and was now expanding to fill every space in my consciousness. If they could plan in secret, so could I. If they could manipulate and pressure, I could protect and prepare. I called Mr. Lopez again. "I need to make some legal changes," I told him. "I want to make sure my house is protected, that no one can force me to sell, that if something happens to me, things are left the way I want them." Over the next 2 weeks, Mr. Lopez helped me get everything in order. We drafted a clear and specific will. The house would be placed in a trust. If I died, it would be sold and the money divided. A portion for Armando, yes, because despite everything, he was still my son. But another portion for my sister, Lorena, and another portion for a foundation supporting elderly women that Mr. Lopez recommended. Armando would inherit, but not everything. Not total control, not the grand prize for having ignored and manipulated me. I also updated the deed to the house. I made sure it was solely in my name, with no legal ambiguity. I checked that there was no way someone could lay claim to it or force a sale without my explicit consent. Mr. Lopez was thorough. Every detail mattered. Every clause was a protection. And then I did something else. Something I hadn't even considered before, but that now seemed not only reasonable but necessary. I put the house on the market. For real this time. But not to give the money to Armando and Paula. For me. For my future. For my freedom. Because while I was running those numbers, while reviewing my finances, I had discovered something else. My sister Lorena had been asking me to move to California for years. She lived in a small town near the coast. Warm climate all year. A community of retirees. Peace. She had sent me photos of a condo that was for sale near her house. 2 bedrooms, ocean view, $200,000. More expensive than the condos Paula was showing me, yes, but it was what I wanted, not what they needed me to want. If I sold the house for $420,000, bought the condo for $200,000, I'd be left with $220,000, more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of my days. To travel, to help Lorena if she needed it, to be generous when I wanted to be, not when I was forced to be, to live near someone who actually loved me, who called me, who asked how I was with no strings attached. The idea was terrifying, leaving the city where I had lived my entire life, leaving the house where I had, well, buried my husband's ashes in the garden, leaving the memories. But it was also liberating, starting over at 65. Why not? Who said life ended at this age? Who had decided I had to stay put, waiting for my son to visit when it was convenient for him? Daniel Ruiz came to appraise the house again. This time, I was sure. This time, it was my decision. Put it on the market, I told him. But I want total discretion. No for sale sign out front. I don't want anyone to know until it's sold. I understand perfectly, Mrs. Gonzalez. I have private buyers looking for exactly this type of property. We can handle everything with absolute confidentiality. The next few days were strange. I knew what was coming. I knew that eventually, Armando and Paula would be back. The silence wasn't sustainable. They needed something from me. And when people need something, they always come back. It was only a matter of time. That time came on a Thursday afternoon. Armando showed up at my door, alone, without Paula. He looked tired, worn out. He had dark circles under his eyes. He had lost weight. For a moment, my mother's heart softened. My boy, my son. He looked so vulnerably, so defeated. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "Can we talk? Please." I let him in. I made coffee. We sat in the living room as we had so many times before. But this time, there was a distance between us that hadn't existed before. An invisible but deep crack. "Mom, I'm sorry. I've been an idiot. Paula has been." Very insistent, and I let her pressure me. I let her pressure you. It wasn't right. I know that. But the thing is, we're desperate. We really are desperate. The owner of the apartment where we live raised our rent. $500 more a month. We can't afford it. And we can't find anything cheaper. The prices are impossible. I listened. I said nothing. I just listened. Because now I knew how to listen differently. I knew how to detect the manipulation even when it was wrapped in an apology. "I need your help, Mom. Not necessarily by selling the house. I get that that's a lot to ask. But maybe you could lend us something. $50,000. For the down payment on a smaller apartment. Something we can afford a mortgage on. We'll pay you back. I swear. With interest if you want. Whatever you say. We just need this push. This one last push to get ahead. 50,000. They had lowered the request. It was the new strategy. Ask for less to make it seem reasonable. To make me feel like they were being considerate, flexible. That they were compromising when, in reality, they still just wanted my money. Just in a smaller, seemingly digestible dose. "Armando," I said finally, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. In these last few months, how many times have you called me just to see how I am, without asking for anything, without wanting something, just to talk?" He was quiet, staring into his coffee cup, and in that silence was my answer. Armando couldn't answer my question. He kept staring at his coffee, as if the answers were floating in the dark liquid. Finally, he looked up, his eyes glassy. "Mom, I love you. I've always loved you. I've just been busy. Life is complicated. Work is overwhelming. Paula needs attention. It's not that I don't think about you, but you don't call," I said, with a calmness that surprised me. "You don't ask how I am. You don't come to visit just because. You only show up when you need something. And now you come with this story that you're desperate. But 3 months ago, you were on vacation at the beach. 2 months ago, Paula had a new designer handbag. Armando, I'm not stupid. I'm old, but I'm not stupid. That's different, Mom. Those are small things. We have to live a little, too. We can't just be miserable all the time, saving every penny. But an apartment is different. It's a big investment. It's something we need help to achieve. And why does it have to be my help? Why does it have to come from my assets? From my security? Your father and I bought this house alone. No one helped us. We worked for years. We sacrificed. Why can't you do the same? Because times are different, Armando exploded, standing up. Because now everything costs triple, because salaries don't keep up, because your generation had it easier, and you don't want to accept it. You all could buy houses on a single salary. We can barely pay rent with 2 salaries. It's not fair that you have so much and you don't want to share. There it was, the real reason. It wasn't help they wanted. It was redistribution. It was the idea that what was mine was also theirs. That my years of work, my sacrifices, my security, all of it should be available to them because life was hard, because they deserved it, because I was selfish if I didn't hand it over. Armando, I said, standing up too. Your father died leaving me this house and a small pension. This house is my security. It's what allows me to live peacefully. If I give you $50,000, if I give you any amount, I am risking my future. And for what? So you and Paula can have an apartment you probably won't be able to maintain, because your spending doesn't match your income. I've been watching. I've been paying attention. And what I see is that you don't have an income problem. You have a priorities problem. That's not true, he said, his jaw tight. You don't know anything about our finances. You don't know what we spend or don't spend. I know Paula gets a new phone every year. I know you eat out at least 3 times a week. I know you have premium cable. I know Paula goes to the salon every month. I know a lot of things, Armando, because I've been paying attention. And what I see is a lifestyle that doesn't match the desperation you're describing. Armando looked at me as if he didn't know me, as if the submissive, accommodating mother he had always known had been replaced by a stranger who dared to question, to point things out, to refuse. I can't believe you're being so cruel, he said, his voice trembling, so calculating, choosing your money over your own son. Dad would be so disappointed in you. That was the final blow, using Roberto against me. But this time, it didn't work. This time, I knew better. Your father, I said, my voice firm, taught me to value myself. He told me 1,000 times not to let anyone make me feel small, to take care of myself. He would be proud that I'm finally listening to that advice. Armando grabbed his jacket. He walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned. Fine, Mom. Keep your house, keep your money, but don't expect me to be available when you need me. Don't expect calls, don't expect visits. If you want to be alone, you're going to be alone. And he left. My son left, leaving that threat hanging in the air like toxic smoke. I closed the door behind him, and something inside me finally broke. I cried. I cried like I hadn't cried since Roberto's death. I cried for the son I had lost. Or maybe for the son I had never really had. For the illusion of family that had crumbled. For the loneliness that awaited me. But among the tears, there was something else. Relief. Clarity. Freedom. Because I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to pretend this relationship was healthy. I didn't have to carry the guilt of disappointing someone who only valued me for what I could give them. That night I called Lorena. I told her everything. Every detail of the conversation. Every hurtful word. Every veiled threat. Lorena listened in silence, and when I finished, she said something I will never forget. Amelia, sometimes losing someone who didn't value you is actually gaining yourself. Come to California. Start over. There are people here who truly love you. No conditions. No agendas. And in that moment, I made the final decision. I would call Daniel Ruiz tomorrow. I would fast-track the sale of the house. I would move to California. I would live my final years near someone who actually loved me, who called me just to hear my voice, who needed nothing from me except my presence. 2 weeks later, Daniel Ruiz called me, excited. I have an offer, Mrs. Gonzalez. A young couple, Professionals. They want the house to start their family. They're offering $430,000. Cash. A 30-day close. It's an excellent offer. I accepted immediately. I didn't think twice. We signed the agreement that same afternoon. The house was sold. My new life was beginning. And Armando knew nothing. Paula knew nothing. Because they didn't need to know. They were no longer part of my decisions. Lorena was ecstatic. She started looking into the condo she had shown me. It was still available. 2 bedrooms. Ocean view. A quiet community full of people our age. We did a video call with the realtor. I virtually toured every room. The wide balcony where I could drink coffee every morning looking at the ocean. The small but sufficient kitchen. The master bedroom with big, bright windows. It was perfect. It was mine. It was my choice. I made the offer. $200,000. They accepted. The closing was scheduled for 2 weeks after I closed on my current house. Everything was falling into place. As if the universe was finally on my side. As if all those decades of sacrifice were finally being rewarded with this chance to reinvent myself. But there was still one loose end. Armando and Paula still knew nothing. They still weren't speaking to me. The silence continued. And I knew they would have to find out eventually. I couldn't just disappear without saying anything. Although a part of me wanted to. I wanted to just leave and have them discover my absence by accident. To have them ring the doorbell one day and find strangers living in what had been my house. But that wasn't my style. It never had been. So I made a decision. I would tell them. But not in private. Not in a conversation where they could manipulate me or make me feel guilty. I would do it publicly. I would make it official. I would do it in a way that left no room for argument. I decided to host a dinner. A family dinner. I would invite Armando and Paula, Paula's parents, Don Cesar and Doña Sonia, a few close neighbors who had been witnesses to my life for decades. It would be my farewell, my announcement, my closure. I sent them the invitation via text message. Dinner at my house on Saturday at 7 o'clock in the evening. I have an important announcement to make. Please confirm if you will attend. It was brief, direct. No explanations. Armando replied after 2 hours. We'll be there. You're finally going to do the right thing, Mom. I read that message and smiled. He thought I had finally caved, that I had made them wait long enough and was now ready to announce I would sell the house and give them the money. That this dinner was my surrender, my white flag. He had no idea how wrong he was. He had no idea that the woman who had raised him, the submissive and accommodating mother, had died sometime in these last few months. And in her place, someone new had been born. Someone who had finally learned that loving herself wasn't selfishness. It was survival. Saturday arrived faster than I expected. I spent all morning preparing the dinner. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I needed to keep my hands busy. I needed to do something to stop me from overthinking what I was about to do. The faces I would see, the words they would say, the storm I was about to unleash. I prepared the lamb that Armando loved so much as a boy, mashed potatoes with butter, fresh salad, homemade bread, a tres leches cake for dessert, a full meal, a farewell dinner, though they didn't know it yet. I set the table with the white tablecloth I only used for special occasions. I took out the good china, the crystal glasses that had belonged to Roberto's mother. Everything had to be perfect, because this would be the last time this table would see a family gathering in this house. The guests started arriving at 7 o'clock on the dot. First, my neighbors arrived. Don Ramon and Doña Tatiana Morales, who lived 3 houses down. Then Doña Lucia Lopez, my next-door neighbor who had been my friend for 20 years. Good people, people who knew me for real, who had been there in good times and bad, without expecting anything in return. Armando and Paula arrived 15 minutes late. She was beaming. New dress, perfect makeup, brilliant smile. Armando looked different too, more relaxed, more confident. It was obvious they thought tonight was their victory, that they would finally receive what they had been waiting for, what they believed they deserved. Paula hugged me with fake enthusiasm. Suegra, what a joy to be here. The house smells delicious. We missed you so much these past weeks. Didn't we, Armando? Armando nodded, kissing my cheek. Yes, Mom, we missed you. And we're so excited about your announcement. We knew you'd eventually understand, that you'd see things from our perspective. I just smiled. I said nothing. I invited them in. To sit down. I served wine. We made small talk as everyone settled in. Don Cesar and Doña Sonia Palacios arrived last. Paula's parents brought flowers and a bottle of expensive wine. They sat next to their daughter with those satisfied smiles of parents who know their little girl is about to get what she wants. When everyone was seated, when the glasses were full and the plates served, I took my place at the head of the table, in the spot that had always been Roberto's. I looked at each person present, my son, my daughter-in-law, her parents, my neighbors, my friends. And I felt a strange peace, a calm that came from knowing I was doing the right thing for me. Well, I said, raising my glass slightly, thank you all for coming tonight. I know some of you are wondering why this dinner, why this gathering, so I won't make you wait any longer. I have an important announcement to make, something that will change things for all of us. Paula leaned forward, her eyes sparkled with anticipation. Armando watched me expectantly. Don Cesar nodded, as if giving me permission to continue. As if I needed his permission to speak in my own house. I've decided to sell this house, I said, my voice clear and firm. Paula let out a small, stifled squeal of joy. Armando smiled broadly. I knew it, Mom. I knew you'd understand. I knew you'd do the right thing for your family. I'm not finished, I said, raising my hand. Everyone fell silent. I've decided to sell this house. In fact, I've already sold it. The deal closed a week ago. The new owners take possession in 3 weeks. The silence that followed was absolute. Paula blinked, confused. Armando frowned. You already sold it? He asked. But we were going to help you with that. We were going to find buyers. Negotiate the best price. I already found the best price, I replied. $430,000. 10,000 more than the first appraiser estimated. I am very satisfied with the sale. Paula found her voice. Her tone was no longer sweet. 430,000. That's wonderful, suegra. So with that, you can buy your condo and still have more than enough left over to help us with ours. In fact, you could lend us 300,000 and you'd still have 130,000 for yourself. It's perfect. It's more than we expected. I took a sip of my wine. I let the silence stretch for another moment, savored their growing discomfort. I am not lending you anything, I said finally. Not 300,000, not 50,000, not a single dollar. Paula's expression changed completely. Shock, disbelief, rage beginning to form behind her eyes. What did you say? I said I am not lending you any money. In fact, I'm moving to California. I've already bought a condo there, near my sister Lorena. Ocean view, 2 bedrooms. $200,000. I'm moving in a month. Armando turned pale. Mom, this is a joke. Right? You're playing a joke on us. It's not a joke, Armando. It's my decision. My life. My money. And I've decided to use it on myself. On my happiness. On living near someone who actually loves me without conditions. Paula stood up so abruptly her chair fell backward. This is ridiculous. This is selfish. How can you do this to your own son? To your family? We spent months waiting. Months planning our future, counting on you. And now you just decide, no? That you're going to California to live your life as if you have no responsibilities here? My only responsibilities are to myself, I said, standing up as well. For months, you pressured me. You manipulated me. You made me feel guilty for wanting to keep my own house. You told me I was selfish for not wanting to fund your dreams. You threatened to abandon me if I didn't do what you wanted. And you know what I discovered? That I was already abandoned. That you only looked for me when you needed something. That to you I wasn't a mother. I was a bank account. That's not true, Armando shouted, standing up too. We love you. We just wanted your help. We wanted you to be part of our lives. Then why didn't you call me once in 3 weeks? Why didn't you come visit just to see how I was? Why was every conversation about money? About the house? About what I could give you? Tell me, Armando, when was the last time you asked me how I was feeling, what I was thinking, what I wanted? Not what you wanted me to want. What I truly wanted. Armando couldn't answer. He opened his mouth, closed it. He looked at Paula, searching for help. But Paula was furious. Too furious to be strategic. You know what, Amelia? We always knew you were selfish. Armando warned me. He told me his mother was like that she only thought of herself. But I didn't believe him. I thought I could make you see reason, that I could teach you what it means to be a family. But I see I was wrong. You are a bitter old woman who would rather have her money than her own blood. Paula. Doña Sonia intervened, clearly uncomfortable. Maybe this isn't the time. No, Mom, it is the time. Someone has to tell the truth. She made us waste months. Months we could have used looking for other options. She made us believe she would finally help us. And now she hits us with this. That she's going to California. That she's buying her Ocean View condo. While we're what? Still stuck in a rental we can't afford. Looking for apartments we can't buy. Because our mother-in-law decided her comfort is more important than our future. Your future is not my responsibility, I said calmly, though I was trembling inside. You are adults, professionals, with jobs, with incomes. If you can't buy a property, it's because your priorities are wrong. Because you spend on things you don't need. Because you want to live beyond your means. And you thought I was going to subsidize that lifestyle. But I won't. Doña Lucia, my neighbor, spoke for the first time. Amelia is right. I've seen how you two have treated her these past months. The constant visits. The pressure. Amelia told me everything. And I think she is making the best decision. A brave decision. Moving at this age isn't easy. But doing it to be near people who value her is admirable. No one asked for your opinion, Signora, Paula spat. You are in my house, I said, my voice like steel, and you will speak to my guests with respect, or you will leave right now. Paula looked at me with pure, undisguised hatred. Without the mask of the sweet daughter-in-law, this was her real face, and I was glad to finally be seeing it, to know I hadn't been crazy, that my intuition had been right all along. Let's go, Armando, Paula said, grabbing her purse. I'm not staying here to be insulted. Armando looked at me one last time. There was pain in his eyes. But there was something else too. Resentment, disappointment, and I knew I had lost my son, or maybe I had never really had him. Armando and Paula left, slamming the door so hard it made the pictures on the wall tremble. Don Cesar and Doña Sonia stayed a few minutes longer, clearly ashamed of their daughter's behavior. We are so sorry, Amelia, Doña Sonia said sincerely. We didn't know things had gone this far. Paula told us a different version. She told us you had offered to help them, and then changed your mind. We didn't know about all the pressure they were putting on you. Don Cesar nodded. You are doing the right thing. A person your age deserves peace, deserves to live without this tension. And if California offers you that, then go, live, be happy. We will talk to Paula, though I doubt she'll want to listen. They left soon after. My neighbors stayed a while longer. We drank more wine. We ate the dessert that no one had touched during the drama. And we talked. We talked about real things, about memories, about the life I had built in this house, about the good years and the hard ones, about Roberto, about how he would have supported this decision. When they finally left and I was alone in the quiet house, I didn't feel sadness. I felt relief. A deep, complete relief. I had taken the step. I had spoken my truth. And the sky hadn't fallen. The world hadn't ended. A chapter had just closed, so a new one could begin. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind, packing up 40 years of life into boxes, deciding what to take and what to leave, donating clothes, selling furniture, saying goodbye to neighbors, to the house, to the yard where Roberto had died among the hydrangeas. I cried while I packed, but they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of closure, of grieving for what I was leaving, but also of excitement for what was to come. Armando didn't call. He didn't come. The silence was total now. Final. And even though it hurt, it no longer surprised me. Paula had shown her true face that night, and Armando had chosen to be on her side. He had chosen resentment over love, disappointment over understanding. And I had to accept that. I had to let him go. Lorena called me every day. She sent me pictures of the condo, of the beach, of the small coastal town that would be my new home. She told me about the friends she already had waiting for me. A group of women our age who met on Thursdays to play cards, who went to the farmers market together on Saturdays, who looked out for each other. That was family. That was what I had been looking for without knowing it. Moving day arrived on a sunny Tuesday. The new owners of the house came early. A young couple. He was a doctor. She was an architect. They were expecting their first baby. They showed me the ultrasound pictures with pride. We sat in the empty living room while we signed the final papers. I told them stories about the house, about the walls Roberto had painted, the garden we had cultivated together, the tree Armando had planted when he was 8. Take care of this house, I told them. It has a lot of love in its walls, a lot of history, a lot of life. And they promised they would, that they would raise their baby here, that they would build their own history in these rooms that had held mine for so many years. I handed them the keys and walked out for the last time. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I looked back, maybe I would regret it. Maybe the nostalgia would overcome me. So I looked forward, toward the moving truck that was waiting, toward the plane I would be catching in 3 hours, toward California, toward Lorena, toward my new life. The flight was smooth. I looked out the window, watching the clouds, thinking about everything that had happened, about how I had gotten here, a 65-year-old woman, leaving everything she had ever known to start over. It was terrifying. It was liberating. It was necessary. Lorena was waiting for me at the airport with a bouquet of flowers and a huge smile. We hugged like we hadn't hugged in years. I cried on her shoulder. She cried on mine. And in that hug was everything. Forgiveness for the years of distance. Gratitude for being here now. The promise not to let each other go again. The condo was even more beautiful in person. The balcony looked directly out over the ocean. I could hear the waves from the living room. The breeze brought in that salty smell that cleanses and renews. Lorena had decorated the guest room with pictures of us as children, of our parents, of the family we had been before life pulled us apart. That first night, I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine. The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in oranges and pinks and purples, and for the first time in years, maybe decades, I felt at peace. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing. My phone rang, an unknown number. I hesitated to answer, but something made me do it. It was Don Cesar. "Amelia," he said, his voice tired. "I just wanted you to know that Paula and Armando had to move in with us. They couldn't pay the rent increase, and they are already causing problems. Paula complains about everything. Armando is bitter. They realize now that maybe you were right, that their priorities were wrong. But it's too late now. You're in California, and they are here, living with the consequences of their decisions." I thanked him for the call. I wished him luck, and I hung up, and I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel that joy of revenge. I just felt sadness for my son, for the choices he had made, for the life he could have had if he had chosen differently. But those were his lessons to learn, his path to walk. I couldn't save him anymore. It wasn't my job to save him. The following months were about adjusting, meeting Lorena's friends, joining the Thursday card game, walking on the beach every morning, learning to live again, not as a mother, not as a widow, just as Amelia, as myself, with my own desires, my own decisions, my own life. Armando finally called 6 months later. His voice was different, more humble, smaller. "Mom," he said, "I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for how I treated you. I'm sorry I prioritized money over you. I'm sorry I let Paula manipulate me. You were right. Our priorities were all wrong. Living with Paula's parents, it made me see that. It made me see a lot of things. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When he finished, I took a deep breath. Armando, I said, I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back. It doesn't mean things can be the way they were. You broke my trust. You broke our relationship. And that takes time to heal. If it ever does, I know, Mom. I understand. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. That I miss you. That maybe someday, if you want, we can try to rebuild something. Not what we had, but something new. Something more honest. Maybe, I said, someday. But right now, I need to keep focusing on me, on my healing, on my life here. And you need to focus on yours, on fixing your marriage, on learning to live within your means, on growing up. We hung up with vague promises to talk soon, but I knew soon might never come, and I was okay with that. I had learned that letting go wasn't abandonment. It was liberation. It was allowing everyone to live their own lives, make their own mistakes, find their own way. Now, sitting on my balcony looking at the ocean with Lorena by my side, I can say I made the right decision. I got my life back. I got my dignity back. I got my peace back. And even though the path was painful, even though I lost my son in the process, I gained something more valuable. I gained myself. To the women who read this story, who are living through similar situations, I say this: it is never too late to choose yourself. It is never too late to say no. It is never too late to protect what is yours. The guilt they make you feel for setting boundaries is manipulation disguised as love. Real love doesn't demand. It doesn't pressure. It doesn't threaten. Real love respects. It supports. It celebrates your decisions, even when it doesn't understand them. And if you have to let someone go to find your peace, even if that someone is your own blood, do it. Because at the end of the day, the person you have to live with forever is yourself. And you deserve to live in peace. You deserve to live without guilt. You deserve to live happily. I raise my glass to the setting Sunday, to this new life I built from the ashes of the old one. To the women who, like me, found the courage to say enough. I toast to us, to those who chose peace over guilt, dignity over compliance, freedom over obligation. I toast to those who finally said, I matter too.